Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Joel Rosen and I am an adrenal fatigue recovery expert, and I want to welcome you back to another edition of your Adrenal Fix. Today I wanted to talk to you about adrenal problems and insomnia. Practically everyone that I consult with in regards to their adrenal problems has one form or another a sleeping problem, whether it's tossing and turning and not being able to fall asleep, or waking up several times in the evening to go to the restroom, or just tossing and turning and can't fall asleep, or lastly waking up with very little energy, or all three. Based on one of those things, whether it's falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking up, we can tell a lot about what kind of adrenal problem you have. Of course, the best test that I find that's out there nowadays are the saliva samples. And that's because it's measuring the free fraction of the hormone, meaning the part of the hormone that's not already bound up to the protein in the blood and is actually available for use. And what happens with traditional medicine is they typically only will do that blood reading, and they'll only do it at one time of the day. And if you are crashing at other times of the day, or really high at other parts of the day, or low across the board but not low enough to be told that it's adrenal insufficiency, then the medical model is going to look at you like you're crazy and that there's nothing wrong with you. However, the saliva sample is great because it can measure your cortisol levels throughout the day. So first thing in the morning when we first wake up, cortisol levels should be the highest. And when we go to bed at night, cortisol should be the lowest. And it should sort of look like a reclining chair where it's high in the morning, it's low in the evening, you wake up, you bound out of bed, you have energy throughout the entire day, and then when you hit the pillow, you fall asleep like a baby, and you do that all day, every day, the next day after the next day. How many of you guys are doing that? Probably not very many. So let's talk about that. Cortisol, firstly, should be really high in the morning and then low in the evening. And melatonin is the inverse, so it should be really low in the morning and really high in the evening. And if melatonin is high in the evening, then we're going to be very, very tired. That's why a lot of people will try to take melatonin and they'll get some important or a great relief, but it's not fixing the cause of the problem. So there's a difference between having too much cortisol or too little cortisol, and there's a continuum. So typically with an acute stress response, whether we have an infection or we have a new muscle trauma, an injury, or we found out about a loan, or our kid got in trouble from school, then you're going to have that acute stress response. Typically your cortisol is going to be really high across the board. People who have high cortisol levels typically are going to have problems falling asleep. They're going to perspire easily, they're going to have raciness of their heart, they're going to be under a lot of stress, and they can't fall asleep. Whereas on the other hand, you have people that have really low cortisol, and these are people that have more of a chronic stress response. So maybe that infection just never went away, or maybe that muscle injury and the infection and little Johnny and bills just kept piling up over and over and over and over again till eventually it depleted the stress saving bank account and you have a non-sufficient funds in your stress account. And so what happens is these people typically will fall asleep, but they can't stay asleep through the entire evening. Typically these are people who are also reactive hypoglycemic, which means they miss a breakfast, or they waited 6 hours between the first time they ate and the next time they ate, or they're skipping meals. And what's happening is the blood sugar is dropping too low, so when they go to bed they fall asleep okay, but the blood sugar just plummets, and then the adrenal glands sort of get a wake-up call from the brain and say, hey, you gotta pump some more sugar into the bloodstream, so it releases cortisol. And that's a stressful event. What happens is you wake up wired and tired and you just can't fall asleep. And if that's happened to you, that's typically what will happen. One of the suggestions I would say is try taking maybe some apple slices if you're falling in this situation, a half hour before bed, mix it with a little bit of nut butter, and you should be good to go. As far as people that have a little bit of both, where they don't fall asleep but they don't stay asleep, typically they're in a maladaptive stage. So they may have some high cortisol levels, some low cortisol levels, but it's not typically the graph of what we like to see from high in the morning and low in the evening. And that's typical of a of a cortisol rhythm problem. And these are people that have hippocampus problems. And what that means in English is they have bad memory, their short-term memory is shot, they don't remember things, they have good energy on one day, and then the least little bit of stress, then they're just floored. So hopefully we shed a little bit of light on why typically adrenal gland dysfunction has a lot to do with insomnia, whether it's falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking up with a lot of energy. If you liked what you heard, then do me a favor and give a thumbs up or a like or a comment underneath here. If you want to find out some more information, then just follow the link to my blog, my Adrenal Fatigue Society blog, where we go over a lot of these things in detail. And also the last thing I'd like to say is don't just get caught up in, hey, what's the best supplement for this, or what's the best supplement for that. That's almost like the traditional medical model of saying, hey, what's the best medication for this, or what's the best medication for that. And the analogy I use is if you have a rat problem in your backyard and you set up some rat traps, it doesn't matter if you kill the rats because you wake up the next day and then there's more rats there. Why is that? That's because there's garbage in the backyard, and until you clean up the garbage, those rats will keep coming back. And it's the same thing in your body. Until you clean up the inflammation or the garbage in the body, whether it's food sensitivities, leaky gut, heavy metal toxicities, infections, stressful jobs, stressful marriages, stressful kids, finances, maybe a musculoskeletal condition, a work-related injury, or sitting in an environment all day. And the other thing no one ever really talks to you about are EMFs, the exposures to electric magnetic frequencies, which we'll talk about a little bit. But suffice to say, you can't just take this pill or that pill or this supplement or that supplement and it's going to fix all these problems. So just realize that it starts with getting an adrenal saliva test, knowing what your cortisol rhythm is doing throughout the day. Is it nice and steady? Is it too high? Is it too low? Is it in between? And that will give us a real good game plan when we combine that with what you're telling the doctor in terms of, hey, I can't fall asleep, or I can't stay asleep, or I'm doing all three and I'm not waking up with energy. Because you know what, doctors are supposed to pay attention, and they're supposed to listen to what's going on with you and not just say, okay, here's this, go on, I got another appointment, you got to leave now. So hopefully you found this valuable. My name is Dr. Joel Rosen for your Adrenal Fix, and I look forward to giving you some more information soon. Thank you so much.